Spoken from someone who left Princeton. Okay, now we'll turn to you for the first question of this panel.
All right, finally, Margaret Prescott, KPFK in Southern California and Los Angeles. And my audience coming very much from the reality of inner city, East Los Angeles, as well as South Los Angeles, although our range is from Santa Barbara all the way down to San Diego. And I wanted to, since I'm just getting now to ask my question, perhaps it's a bit unfair to the panelists because some of them have to do with issues that were raised earlier. And one has to do with an issue that might be for the next panel, but I'm not quite sure I'll get to the mic again. So why don't I do this? There's been a lot of talk of marriage as a solution and the Moynihan report. I remember the Moynihan report. Now that strategy didn't work then, and I'm wondering what makes this body or people who have been putting it forward to think that it will work as a solution now, just getting down to the reality of it. Also within that, I got, after I agreed to come here, an email from some of the other commissioners who are not here, Michael Yaki, Alan Melendez, the vice chair, Abigail Thernstrom, complaining about the fact that they have not had input put into this particular gathering. And they raised the issue on civil rights, for example. We talk a lot about marriage. There has been no mention of the fight for gay marriage, for example. And are you including that when you're talking about marriage and putting forward marriage as a solution? And the last thing has to do...
Why don't we just stick to the first question, and I would...
Well, can I finish my other question since I'm not sure I can get to the other mic? Get back up here again?
Why don't we just take them one at a time, especially since... And by the way, I'll
wait
save
here,
you
then.
From the second question, since that's more properly addressed to us. But with regard to her first question about the Moynihan report.
Okay.
Well, I'm a little puzzled because you say, well, the Moynihan report touted marriage and it's been tried, it's failed. I think after the Moynihan report, we went in exactly the opposite direction. I think we went sort of on a tear of aggressively celebrating family diversity, and I know that was well-meaning, and but I think ultimately it's been sort of pernicious. And this goes back to the responsibility of the leadership class. I'm sorry to have to say this, but I think the leadership class, the Ivy League, and especially sort of the white educated class, and I'm sort of a card-carrying member, and I'm an Ivy League professor, so these people are all around me. I would have to say that I think that on an important level they are morally bankrupt, okay?
I agree.
They have really sold out the rest of society in a self-serving way, and let me just put it this way. They talk the 60s, but they live the 50s, all right? And if you look at the data, despite all the media hype about Murphy Brown and these fast lifestyles, the upper middle class whites are the most married, least divorced, most conventional class in society, and their kids are making out like bandits because of it, right? And because they're touting all these alternative lifestyles, they're selling the rest of society down the river, and people who have less education and fewer resources are really not as well equipped to deal with all of the difficulties and the complications
What do you mean
of
by
these alternative lifestyles.
Which lifestyles are you referring to?
I'm talking about non-traditional, non-conventional modes of raising children, and here I'm talking specifically about single parenthood, step parenthood, all the different combinations and permutations that have become more multiple partner fertility, a euphemism, right? Nobody, I think, who has any sense can think that a community, where there are a large number of people having children by multiple women or multiple men, none of whom they're married to, is a community that can build human capital effectively. I'm sorry, it just can't be done, right? So these problems, I do lay them at the feet of the leadership class, which I think has shown bad faith.
Is there anyone else on the panel who wants to?
They may want to respond to the second part, which has to do with the mixing up of poverty and neglect, because thank goodness I got married again, by the way, was a single mother for a while because I very much would have,
okay.
you know, felt the sting of much was said because,
Wait a minute,
okay.
I'm proud to say that I'm not proud to say this, but I've been married twice, and I believe in the institution of marriage, and I don't know why there are not more younger people getting married. I'm willing to let let everyone else have the men that are out there, but I believe in the institution of marriage, and I believe that
Would that be
clearly-
gay marriage as well?
That's a whole different can of fish.
Okay, we need to move on to another question.
Gay marriage is irrelevant, except in the Ivy League, that's the only
It's
kind of marriage
irrelevant,
that
did you
people
say?
praise.
Okay.
But
Okay.
apart from that,
All right.
Ken Masugi, and I have a question for Mr. Stephanie, and I think it's really more of a sharpening of Todd's question, because I was intrigued by your statement that you helped destroy a culture. And I'm wondering, I mean, I don't know rap from Zap, but our bro Plato said that the music controls the mores. And so I'm wondering whether there's anything in your artistry or the artistry you promote that might actually help refine our culture.
Yeah, you know, I put out a song, and you can go to YouTube, type in the title "We Must Be in Love" by a group called Pure Soul. Through my label in 1995, we distributed the song, which, you know, really is an homage to marriage. The video that we shot, which was directed by a young man named Keith Ward, who had done videos for all sorts of famous acts of that period, TLC and others. It essentially was a video of young people getting married. The young woman, the bride in the video was Kelly Williams, who was in the sitcom Family Matters. And you know, they were in their early 20s, and we wanted to show that marriage and structured family connections were part of the culture, and part of the youth culture, more importantly. And lo and behold, that became my most successful single for my company, and they became our most successful group. So, you know, there was profitability and positivity, if you know, if I could coin a phrase. And popular culture can do that and does do that. If you watch the Disney Channel, you know, the Disney Channel, in opposition to other youth-oriented you know, cable outlets, provides, you know, movies, High School the Musical, some of the sitcoms, so forth, that tend to be family friendly, and you know, tend to be less negative than a lot of the public culture that we've seen over the course of the past 30 years. And I think part of that may derive from young people who've grown up with, you know, divorced and disconnected parents and grandparents who are looking for stability themselves. So their culture perhaps mirrors some of that.
May I just make
Sure.
a comment?
And then we have the,
just
Kim the
wanna make a-
enforcer says we only have one more question.
I just want to make a comment because Professor Wax, I just want to say how much I agreed with what you didn't say. And that is, yes, this whole question, where's the young lady? Talked about gay marriage. I didn't want you to think that, yes, I don't think that I don't think that, at least I, for one, are afraid or unwilling to discuss the question or the issue of gay marriage. I just think that on the issue that we're talking about with respect of raising a family, which will give children an opportunity to have a disciplined structure, that it's irrelevant.
Okay, thank you. Last questioner.
Yes, excuse me if my voice breaks a little bit. I'm Shamarka Keita. Herb Gutman pointed out in his book, The Black Family and Slavery to Freedom, that while slavery was very successful at destroying families, that after slavery was over, that Afro-North American people made a tremendous effort to reassemble their families and to even get pieces of paper. I can tell the story of my own grandmother who married someone in her church just to adopt the girl next door, and she was 60-something years old when she did that. So the question becomes, what happened to an ideology of family within Afro-America? And I do not believe that civil rights, in its truest and traditional sense, which was about laws, has very much to offer in the way of a discussion about that, which is really something about the quality of life and about culture and about the absence of a meta-narrative of Afro-American life. What we have not heard here at all today from anyone is a disaggregation of the Afro-North American community to look at those segments where you don't have any out-of-wedlock births, or at least not many or any that are mentioned. For example, in the Nation of Islam, that's almost unheard of. You don't have, out-of-wedlock births amongst certain groups of Seventh-day Adventists and others. So the question becomes, what happened to the typical Afro-American, North American, because there are Afro, Latinos, et cetera, Afro-North American community? What happened to average blue-collar communities, or the quote, typical communities of which we all are connected to? What happened to the ideology around marriage and the ideology around a belief that one could have a community, a distinct community? Afro-North Americans did not come here as a single group with a meta-narrative. We were not one single African ethnic group. We were many. And out of that, we had to forge something in the 1920s in the context of segregation, something that was quasi-successful but never had the kind of ideological glue. So I would like to raise a question about whether or not using the term civil rights is even the right paradigm, the right concept to talk about something that really revolves around the quality of life, the building of community, and actually human rights, which is something that Malcolm talked about. Someone who, while he made it onto a postage stamp and therefore was co-opted, the best of what he had to say is not often remembered. And on this thing,
let's let them.
Let me just say one other thing. And on this thing that Dr. Wax and Mr. Jones said about people were talking about gay marriage. Listen, Jimmy Baldwin was gay, but he always talked about how our young men could raise their families. He never talked about being gay or talking about gay rights. He talked about our families as a community.
Okay. Who wants to address this question?
Well, just very briefly, I mean, you can talk endlessly about, you can speculate what happened to the black family, and I think I'd also like to talk about crime and the high rates of crime in the black community, which is really a very important topic that maybe hasn't gotten enough of an airing. Why is it that crime rates just soared in the 60s and 70s, and African Americans were disproportionately involved in that, right? So we can speculate endlessly, but one of the things I say in my book is, look, we can come up with all these theories, but they're not necessarily going to help us going forward to find a solution. We really need to look. My personal theory is that the 1960s really did a number on families, and the poorer and more vulnerable and less educated people, I think, were disproportionately affected. So, it's a little bit of a variant of, the rest of society gets a cold and blacks get pneumonia. So these sort of liberationists, the sexual liberationist ethos, I think, was taken a little bit too seriously. And also, this notion that crime is an inevitable outgrowth of oppression and society is criminogenic, that idea was taken a little bit too seriously. But now we're sort of stuck with it. And I think we have to look forward and say, how do we get out of it? And the past is not necessarily going to enlighten us on that.
Yeah, but there are sub-communities within.
Let the other panelists speak.
I think the problem has to do with the fact that even though the black community, is considered the most religious community, that there has been an abandonment of core Judeo-Christian values. The black church needs to be indicted, that many of the pastors are enriching themselves. They have no need for poor people. And that we have to go back to first things, that when you had strong black families, you also had people that feared God and took religion seriously.